In the second part, we'll see how to deal with checkboxes. I've set up a special event type list. We have only two types. One is age restricted and the other one is luxury, and we have a third option to select all the options all together. Let's see how I set up my add event HTML. As I mentioned you in the first part, I moved everything in my format to be inside the controller, so it will be all managed by the controller scope. In my AngularJS, I've defined a special type, initialization. We have an array of objects. So as you can see, we have a name property, which is age restricted for the first item and luxury for the second item. And we have also a checked property initialized to false for both of them. In my add event, I have an ng repeat that loops through the... Fucking hell. In my add event HTML, I have an ng repeat that loops through the items in the array and will create a checkbox for each one of those, and I binding that to the ng model type.checked. So type is my variable that will be used for each item, and checked is the property we want to access. So all the items will be initialized to false. And in terms of label, I'm using the name property. The last thing to notice is that line 90, I've defined the checkbox, which is outside our ng repeat and will be used to select all of them. There's no ng model yet on it, and I will see what to do with this specific option later. Let's take a look at the ng inspector plugin so we can monitor what happens in our scope when I flag one of these options. So let's expand the event controller and let's select our special type array and the first and the second item. So I'll select the age restricted. As you can see now, the checked option is false. Whenever I select it, it becomes true. The same happens for luxury. Well, this was the easy bit. What we want to do now is to click on both and automatically set the value checked to true for age restricted and luxury. So to do so, we'll introduce a new property which can be used pretty much on every clickable element, and it's called ngClick. ngClick takes an expression as input, as pretty much all the Angular directives we've seen so far. So what we're going to do now is to define in our controller a new function. So we'll call it this.select all types equals function. We'll take our item as a parameter. The first thing we want to check inside our function is the value of our both checkbox, and to do so we'll define a model on it that will be eventctl dot both selected. Let's type now in the function if eventctl dot both selected. That would be evaluating the true condition. We'll do something else. Well, we'll do something else, right? Actually, you know what? I don't need a parameter inside this function, so let's remove it. And now if the both selected flag is true, we'll set our these both selected to true as well. So the first time the user will click it, we'll make sure that it's set to true, and when they are deselecting that, it will be false. So these both selected equals false. I'll format this if statement so we don't take those many lines, it's better. After our if statement, we want to loop through all the items in our special type array of objects, and to do so we'll use a nice Angular utility which is the angular.forEach. And the parameter will be the special type, so it takes the array as a first parameter, and the second param will be a function, and we'll redefine our special type to be named item. Inside the function, we're going to basically set the checked value. So item.checked equals to what? To the value of both selected, because if it's true, it will be selected. If it's false, all the options will be unselected. So this will be this.both selected. Now we can change our ngClick to invoke our function. So we'll call eventctl.select all types types, and that's what we do with an ngClick. So whenever the click event is triggered, our function in the controller will be invoked. Now, we can check what will happen if we go back to the add event page, but I can tell you already that this code will not work, and there's a specific reason why, and I want you guys to focus on it. We have seen that in the previous lesson when we have introduced the controller as syntax. But what do you think is this .bothSelected will be referencing? Will it be the same that we have outside the function, or will it be the internal scope of the Angular for each function? I guess that this will be the second option. So what we need to do to actually reference the correct property is to create a reference to this inside our controller. So we'll declare a variable and we'll do var self equals this. So well, I could refactor the whole code, but we need that only for this example. So let's go back to our function and let's change this to be self.postSelected. And just for the sake of it and to be consistent, we'll use the same thing everywhere. So self, self, and self. Okay, so let's save this code and let's save also the add event, and now we can test it. I refresh my page. I can still select the single options, then I'll click on the both option now. And as you can see, everything is being selected. And if I click again on both, it will be unselected. So, does it make sense, guys? Now that we have a reference to this, we can always use it inside nested functions without being worried about weird scopes and referencing something that we are not supposed to. The last thing I want to show you when it comes to checkbox is how to define a specific value to be set when an option is selected or not, because at the minute it's just a boolean, which will be either true or false, but we have two directives that we can use in Angular to decide the value that should be set. The two directives I'm talking about are ngTrueValue and ngForceValue. So let's start with ngTrueValue. And to tell Angular that we want the value to be a string, we'll use double quotes and single quotes. So we'll have a yes option, and in the same way we'll create a force value, ngForceValue equals double quotes and single quotes, and there will be no. So when I save this code, if we go back to our application now, instead of having true and false boolean values, we'll have an actual string value when the user selects it. Let's verify if what I just said is true. So let's open the ngInspector. We still have a boolean because we have initialized that inside our array, but as soon as I select an option, it becomes yes, and the second option becomes yes as well. If I deselect it, it will be no. So if you need to treat a checkbox with special values other than boolean, that's the way of doing that. You might have already noticed that if I click both, it won't work anymore because I'm setting the option to be true, but Angular knows that selected is the yes string and deselected is the no string. So to make it work, we should refactor our code a little so that it will be compliant with what we just done. In the last chapter of this section, we'll talk about how to use a proper date field in AngularJS, and then we'll move into form validations.